You're respected at work, and people trust your judgment. They come to you for answers because you have them. But at home, that's another story. You've been called too much, too opinionated, too controlling, too hard to please, and you don't fully understand why. Could it be that your leadership skills are getting in the way? Let's get into it. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalysts. I'm your host, Shanita B. This is where we discuss how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at life's crossroads can become the catalyst for meaningful change in your leadership and life's direction. Today, we're going to be talking about a crossroads that has plagued us since Eve bit the apple, and the fruit of it shows up in our relationships. And I'm talking about the tension between our relationship at work and our leadership at home. And this is a big deal because, again, this has been something that has been talked about for forever, really. And so I want us to kind of center around a couple of different questions. One is, who are you at your core? And I mean, regardless of your work title, because beyond the title, your characteristics make up your personality. You have these different skills and traits and how they play out and express themselves. And that is meaningful and it does matter. And then another thing that I want us to look at is, are you leading your relationships or are you actually in the relationships? Are you doing the dance and you're going back and forth? Sometimes you're giving the cues and you're following, and sometimes the other person is giving the cues and following. Does that make sense? I think that it does. Leadership is the embodiment of numerous and specific characteristics, traits, and skills. And like any of those things, they can be overused and they can be misapplied. And so I want you to think about things like integrity, assertiveness, intuitiveness, and maybe even some excellent communication skills. And of course, that's just a few of the skills and traits that a leader brings. There are many others, but I just kind of want to put that in your mind as to what I'm referencing. And before we move forward with the rest of this episode, I think that this connects more than you might think. If you have ever felt confident in one area of your life, but unclear in another, especially when it comes to your money, I'm going to be hosting a live workshop called She Leads Her Money because I think that this is important. The goal is to give you some clarity and a strategy so that you can operate in a place of I know and I understand rather than in the place of figure it out. And so if you're interested, check out the link in the show notes. So you can search the web and find a litany of opinions about how a woman is supposed to show up in her relationship, especially for those who are leaders. And so a lot of opinions, they're going to lead to the same outcome. Basically, you're going to just show up and surrender and fall in line as if there's just this one size fits all persona to be worn when you cross the threshold of your home. And when you possess the characteristics that make you a great leader, it can be difficult to throttle that at home. And I think partly that is because you might be throttling some of it at work. But when you get home, you just kind of let it all hang out because now you're in your space, in your place. But you know what this reminds me of? I don't know if you've heard that song by Miranda Lambert, Hide Your Crazy. You know, just the notion that this is the title of a song. I think we kind of navigate between hiding some of who we are and expressing and showcasing some of who we are. And I think it's just this constant thing that we have to deal with. And so let me give you some examples of what I mean when I say that, you know, we have these expectations as leaders because some of these characteristics, they're a part of who we are and they drive what we do. So you might be setting some expectations for your partner the same way that you set KPIs for your team. So think about that. And as an example, it'd be kind of like expecting things to be done a certain way and on a certain timeline without ever actually having a conversation about it. And then when that doesn't happen, and it inevitably will, you're frustrated because in your mind, the expectation was clear and the deal was set. But the reality is it was internal, it was implied, and it was not communicated. And so when those expectations are internal and implied rather than shared and discussed, it's almost always guaranteed to fail because the other person was never given the opportunity to meet those expectations. You didn't have a conversation. You just kind of went by what you thought that the context was and they should know. And that generally doesn't work. So at work, you tend to document, communicate, and align expectations and standards so that everybody is on the same page. But at home, you assume. And we just don't want to find ourselves in the place where we're constantly assuming that the other person knows and understands what it is that we're thinking or what it is that we want. And I know that it's popular to say that somebody should know what we're thinking, somebody should know what we want. Well, I don't know if you know what that old saying is that about assuming they make a ASS out of you and me. That's that's what I mean by that. Or how about this as an example? It's easy for you to delegate all day long because that feels natural to you. But asking for help is a whole other deal. You would rather suffer than to do the thing that would actually offer you some assistance, which is to ask someone to help you because you don't want to appear vulnerable. And this is, I think, really important because I think we have equated vulnerability with weakness. They are not the same. All right. And what about this? Maybe you've been told that you're bossy or intimidating, and friends and families have shared this kind of information with you. I've even had my daughter tell me that I'm intimidating. And of course, I don't see myself as such, but that doesn't negate the fact that she thinks so or that she's thought so in the past. And this is something that I know that a lot of women contend with is having this persona of being intimidating, and you think that you're as mild as a bunny rabbit. But that means that there might be something that we're doing or saying that might cause someone else to believe that that is the case. And I'm not saying that it's always 100% accurate. What I'm saying is sometimes it is worth listening to the person who is sharing that information with you because you can learn something about yourself and you can learn something about that person. And for me, in my particular circumstance, I wanted to develop a really solid and strong relationship with my daughter. So it was important to me to make sure that I understand, what does she mean by using that word, and how did that make her feel? And was there something that I could do or that I should do to try to mitigate that? And then listen to this. Maybe you're the woman who turns every conversation into a problem solving session instead of just listening. It's not just men who do this. A lot of us are fixers. And this is one of those things where we really have to try to strike a balance with how we move and approach things because of how it may come off to the person who we think we're assisting when really we might be making matters worse or offending them. And so my daughter, she told me that in the past, she has described me as the corporate mom to her friends. And part of that is because I'm organized, I'm direct, I'm curious, and I'm for sure a problem solver. And I definitely am future oriented. And so when you put all of that together, okay, well, yes, those are some of the skills that a leader has, but when it comes to having conversations with my daughter, she might not need to see that aspect of me in that particular context. And so one of the things that I understood about her expressing that to me is that problem solving aspect. That is what is underscored for her. So when she has something that she wants to tell me, sometimes she will preface it with just, look, she said, Mom, I just need you to listen right now and not ask me questions. And so that's my cue to put on the brakes. And I know that I've said a whole lot just now, and I recognize that this might make some of you wince a little bit. So just make a mental note of it because you don't have to fix it right now in this moment, but you do need to see it. We need to see things about ourselves because that is what is going to help us to grow. And so just even talking about the situation with my daughter, I have learned over the years when to put on the brakes and when to keep my foot on the gas because it can definitely be situational. And so that might dictate how I respond to what she or anyone else is saying to me. And I do believe that this is who God made me to be, a problem solver, a fixer, a leader. And you think the same. But I don't think that that means that we should not look in the mirror and assess where we may be missing the mark, especially in our relationships. And, think about this. Everybody, or everywhere you turn, you hear people talking about they're on the trauma bus. And so I don't want to make light of people being traumatized, but where does trauma start? It starts in places where oftentimes we think that we should be safe. And it doesn't matter how mild the trauma is, it is still impactful to people, and it shapes the way that they perceive themselves, how they interact and engage with other people, and the same thing for you. So just consider what I'm saying to you, because you get paid to lead and therefore problem solve, cast vision, delegate, and all the other leadership things at work. But at home, the currency takes a different form. And what you're pouring, they may not want to drink. They're not interested in drinking it. And the fact that you have mastered leading others, that is a wonderful thing. But you have learned how to just be. You have to learn how to just be with your family, your friends, your partner. And sometimes that might mean pulling back, just like you would want them to do the same. And this is not to say that you have to be a different person, because I'm not promoting that, nor do I support that at all. Your family and friends and your partners do not want to be led like your team at work. And just like you want to be seen and heard, they want the same from you. Okay, and think about it like this. Work is only getting certain aspects of you. Home is getting all of you. The good, the bad, the indifferent. Work is going to pay you to be a certain way. Home is going to pay you in a different type of currency, as I just mentioned. And so we want to make sure that we keep that in mind as we continue to relate to our family, our friends, and our partners. And so this is really where we want to be honest with ourselves, okay? So these traits that make us wonderful leaders, decisiveness, high standards, self-sufficiency, strategic thinking, and a host of other things, those are not the problem. Again, part of the ability to do these things and to express these in a way that people want to follow you, people want to hear you and listen to you, those are great. The issue or the problem is really the context. Leadership is going to require influence. Love is going to require vulnerability. And as I mentioned earlier, vulnerable does not mean weakness. Okay. And again, the context is everything. Context, context, context. You have to determine how you need to show up in a particular context, right? Your boardroom self is not the same person as your bedroom self. And when you cannot tell the difference, the people in your life start to feel managed instead of loved. And so think of it like this. For those of you who are married or in a dating relationship, you wouldn't talk to your team member the same way you would talk to your husband, right? So you wouldn't send them an email, your team member an email and say, "Well, honey, I need you to come into my office and be sure to bring A, B, and C." You wouldn't do that because you recognize that there is a difference. And so this is what I want you to consider as you're continuing to move through your relationships and trying to understand how your characteristics and your skills being brought into your personal relationships, how those are being expressed, how they might be perceived, and where if there may be an opportunity to promote growth in those scenarios. Okay. Different circumstances and pressures inherently draw out characteristics of your personality. And this might mean that the dominant characteristics will take over either to the betterment or the detriment of your relationship. So if you realize that people may be exiting your life or clamming up, the problem may not be them. It may be you. And listen, before you start naysaying and going in on that, this is just who I am mantra, I want you to think about this and answer this question for yourself. Who is being served and what is being accomplished by just casting aside some of the things that people might have shared with you in the hopes that they might be able to better relate to you? You have to discern the who in these matters. And having strong emotional intelligence is going to go a long way in helping you to assess what is needed. So think about this too. more listening, right? Rather than directing or delegating, and more compassion instead of just jumping to conclusions. And how about more seeking to include by asking for assistance rather than suffering through it? Because I believe that you have people in your life who love you. They want to share things with you. They want to be around you. But in some instances, when they have tried to do that, they feel like potentially they've been alienated. Our humanness longs for connection, and we do that through service to one another, through deep conversations and sharing with one another. And so that means that we may have to make some adjustments, but we shouldn't be the only ones making adjustments. Okay. So I think that should go without saying. But with this particular conversation, we are looking at ourselves. And so I want to make sure that you understand that this is not about reducing yourself or losing yourself. This is choosing to show up the best way that you can for the circumstances, right? So again, part of this is to raise awareness. Where have you been leading when you should have been loving? And it doesn't matter if it's the romantic relationship or if it's with your children or even your friends. You want to consider this question. And then here's another one. What would it look like to bring your whole self, not just the part of you that you think is the most capable or the most competent, but your whole self into your relationships? And then finally, what are you afraid would happen if you put the leadership hat down, even just for a moment? And by putting the leadership hat down, I don't mean that you withdraw who you are and what you bring. I'm saying that it should not look the same necessarily as it does at work. I think that the best leaders know when to adjust their approach. And you know what that's called? Wisdom. Leading yourself through this crossroad means having the self-awareness to recognize when your greatest strength has become a barrier to your greatest need, which is connection. So your leadership traits do not have to cost you love, but they will require you to lead yourself first. And earlier, I said that you don't have to fix it right now, but you do need to see it. Well, now that you have seen it, the question becomes, what will you do with it? And this is, I think, a very thoughtful topic and conversation, one which we probably should regularly visit and revisit because it is that important. And I think that if you're recognizing yourself in this, not because there's something wrong, but because you've been operating from a place where you haven't been clear in certain areas, then we want to address that directly. And I want to point you back to my virtual workshop, which is going to be live on June 13th at 10 a.m. We're going to be talking about the things that will help to clear some things for you. And so I want you to join me and make yourselves available for that. Check out the link in the show notes and we can take it from there. And just remember to hit that follow button because I don't want you to miss an episode. And I appreciate that you have listened and continue to support the podcast. So until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are. Catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll talk to you next week.